Good evening, and welcome to this special meeting of Westminster's Mayor and Common Council. During the public health emergency, we will be conducting our meetings virtually, and they will be available and streamed live on the city's Facebook page, as well as the Community Media Center channel and website. Copies of today's agenda and the entire information packet that the council will be using are available online and on the city's website. Please join me now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First item of business tonight, it's a special meeting, is a public hearing on ordinance number 935. Under state law, we're required to do a public hearing because this includes the tax rate, and public hearings in Westminster are run by the mayor. And so, Mr. Mayor, I'll turn chair over to you.
Mr. President, it's been a while since the public gavel. So I will begin public hearing for ordinance number 935. Ordinance of the Mayor and Common Council of Westminster, Maryland, approving and adopting a budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. Ms. Colston.
Good evening. So you have before you the ordinance for the budget for the fiscal year 2022. Pretty much we're just here tonight to answer any questions that the mayor and council may have. So I will turn it over to you for questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Colston. Do any of my colleagues on the council have any questions or comments to be made?
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Colston, the principal point is that the tax rate remains the same for another year. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Cavacci, are you sure?
We'll dig into it during the work session.
I know. We have a work session coming up. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yeah, Mr. Union.
the public hearing is for, I'm sorry, you mentioned is this the constant yield public hearing?
Well, it's for the budget.
Right, so
It includes-
how is the public, how, if they wanted to comment, would they?
Email.
Email? Okay, so we have no comment,
And we have no comments.
all right?
Yeah, so we'll leave it open for a certain number of days. And I usually ask Ms. Levan, who's not here, how long we should leave it open, but we'll leave it open for until our next meeting. Our next meeting's a week from today. So for 7 days, we'll leave the hearing open. If anybody wants to send in any public comments, they can send them to, I believe, Ms. Visoxi, it's comments@westgov.com. And that can be found on the website, or you can email any of us and we can point you in the right direction. So I will we'll leave the hearing open for a week, and I will pass the gavel back to
Mr. Mayor, before you close it,
Mr. Cavacci.
I would recommend that if anybody is watching, maybe tell them by, say, 3 o'clock on Monday, just so Mr. Visasi has an opportunity to get them together for you for the next meeting. So the people, if they email at 6:50, we're not going to see it.
Mr. Cavacci, that's a good point. So 3 o'clock is probably a good cutoff. I like that. 3 p.m. on Monday, this coming Monday, which the date of that is the 26th, April 26th. So by 3 p.m., if you want your comments heard, send them in by then, and we'll make sure that they're read. All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Your gavel back.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is unfinished business. We have no unfinished business of which I'm aware, other than what's on the agenda later on. Is there any unfinished business that anyone else cares to bring up? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. The first item of new business is change order number 1 to the city's contract with Keller Brothers Incorporated for the Diefendahl Lot Retaining Wall Project. And I understand that Mr. Dick is substituting for Mr. Glass this evening, so we will turn to Mr. Dick, the Deputy Director of Public Works.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. Fiscal year 2021 capital project budget includes funding for repair of the retaining wall located on the east side of the Diffendale parking lot. The project consists of installation of soldier piles and precast concrete panels to back up and take the place of an existing failing gravity wall. On January 12th, 2021, the mayor and common council accepted the bid of Keller Brothers Incorporated of Mount Airy, Maryland, and authorized the mayor's execution of the associated contract in the not to exceed amount of $272,183.16 for the Diffendale Lot Retaining Wall project. The not to exceed figure was predicted on the base bid amount of $248,023.16, plus the additional cost of $24,160 for the thin brick add alternate. The city contract with Keller Brothers, Inc. references the thin brick alternate as an option to be selected at the city's discretion at the appropriate junction during the construction process. The city substantially elected not to move forward with the thin brick alternate, but rather to utilize the precast panels as a mural streetscape surface. Results from the geotech report indicated that the soldier pile sizes had to be increased to accommodate the less than optimal soil quality encountered, necessitating a change order of the city's contract with Keller Brothers, Inc. Change order number 1 has an associated cost of $20,835.26. Its approval would increase the value of the contract to $268,858.42. The 2021 budget for this project was $230,000. Monies to cover this shortfall are available from the $100,000 Sullivan Road Drainage Ditch Project. This project entails the dredging of the drainage ditch between Sullivan Road and Route 140, as well as lining the pipe on Long Valley Road. The dredging piece of this project was completed with operating funds, and the pipelining work has been deferred to a future fiscal year. The staff recommends that the Common Council approves change order number 1 to the city's contract with Keller Brothers and authorizes its execution by the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dick.
Yep.
May I have a motion to approve change order number 1?
I'll move to approve, Mr. President.
A motion by Mr. Kavachi and a second by Ms. Gilbert. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Dick or any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Kavachi.
sounds to me like I don't think we really have much of a choice here. I mean, if they're saying that they aren't big enough and we don't do it, well, then we're wasting $250,000. So not really sure we have an option.
Right, very good. Any other thoughts or questions? I just have one question, and that is on the funding issue. So sounds like the money that's left over from the Sullivan Road project is not extra money. It's rather money that because part of the cost is being deferred. So we're going to have to find the funding for the pipelining work in a future fiscal year. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, just want to make sure everybody understands where the money's coming from. All right, I don't have anything else. If everybody's ready for the vote, we can move on. All those in favor of approval of Warner Construction, change order number 1 to the city's contract with Keller Brothers for the Diffendale Lot Retaining Wall project, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. I seem to have it, and the ayes have it, and the change order is approved. Thank you, Mr. Dick.
Great, thank you.
The next item is approval of Warner Construction change order number 24. Ms. Matthews.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. Change order number 24 is comprised of 2 work items. The first is testing and repair of the existing line sets of a scheduled to remain piece of HVAC equipment that upon recommissioning, Warner Construction discovered was not holding a charge. The second item is 1 cubic yard of unforeseen rock excavation that was discovered when Warner was preparing for the new flagpole foundations. Further information on both of these items can be found in the review letter from Gant Brunette Architects that was included in your agenda packet. These 2 items have a combined cost of $5,945.45, and change order number 24 will not impact the contract time for completion. And staff does recommend that the Common Council approve change order number 24 and authorize its execution by the mayor. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. May I have a motion on Warner Construction Change Order number 24?
So moved.
There's been a motion by Mr. Dayhoff. Is there a second? A second by Ms. Gilbert. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Matthews, or is there any discussion? Okay, I just have one question. Ms. Matthews, is this the last change order we're going to see? Or do you think we have any more now that the building is actually complete?
We will actually have one small minor change order. It's for work that has already been performed. It was to cap an existing roof vent. We have received the cost of that, which was $1,667.50. The project architect has requested additional backup to justify the amount. So I assume Council President Pecoraro that this will be coming before you, most likely on your next meeting agenda of April 26th. And that should close everything out.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. Hearing no further discussion, we'll move on to a vote. All those in favor of approval of Warner Construction Change Order number 24, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The ayes seem to have it, and the ayes have it. And the change order is approved. Thank you very much. The final item under new business is work session number 1 regarding fiscal year 2022 budget proposal. And for that, we will turn to Ms. Matthews and Ms. Colston.
Thank you, President Pecoraro. This work session is designed to provide the Mayor and Common Council with an opportunity to discuss any issues regarding the budget proposal that you either have questions or concerns about. We do have representatives from each city department participating in your meeting this evening. Staff was not advised of any specific work session topics and therefore does not have a formal presentation this evening, but certainly all of us are here to support you in your budget deliberations.
All right. Very good. Thank you. So just to start this off, let me just say that as we know, going into this budget discussion, that the city does have some additional funding available due to the increased assessments that we're seeing right now. So we've got a few $100,000 in additional funding available to us principally from that. And we have a proposal, and I think the chief discussion before us is really on what we want to do about how we want to handle the proposals that come out of the most recent Evergreen staffing study and the recommendations in that. But we also have some requests for a couple of additional positions. And so the question is, how do we want to factor all of that? And I think that most of the other issues that we've discussed in the past are not real challenges for us to deal with right now. As we talked about in the fiber fund, while we do see some shortfalls there, in a gap in out years between the revenue that it's going to be generating and what the cost will be as the state loan falls off. First, we know that these shortfalls were anticipated. We also know that we're expecting to receive some significant federal aid in the next year. And while we've still got lots of decisions to make about how that's going to be used, I think we've got many opportunities to take a look at the aid we're expecting and the debts that we have, the challenges that face the city, the needs that face the city, and the opportunities that face the city, and make some smart plans with some good advice on how we're going to make all that work to really secure the city's financial future. So those discussions are ahead of us. But in the short term, we do have this discussion ahead of us about personnel costs. Mr. Mayor, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share before we get into the discussion?
No, I agree. I think this is the big thing that needs to be discussed by everybody. I think there's a lot of stuff that is we all generally agree on, but this is the one big item, the big ticket item that I think we need to discuss. And like you said, I think coming into this, we were looking at in some way or the other, either choosing between or balancing somehow the adding of 3 possible positions, 2 in public works, 1 in technology, and implementing the highest of the three options. I think, and there's three options for implementing the new pay study. And I know that it's all really important. So, we have the pay study results, I think are compelling. So are the cases being made for the three positions. I think last year, we had the same request in Public Works and I believe technology for these positions. And I think we bumped them to this year. And, we don't want to put them off another year. And I think we need to, Public Works is growing responsibilities as the fiber network matures. And I think technology is something that we have to get used to expanding every so many years, just because of the nature of it. But we have to, take care of the employees that are currently staff in the city as well. So I think that this is the big topic for tonight. I would imagine we're going to spend most of our time on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Matthews, could you just recap for us, the Evergreen study recommendations and also the personnel requests?
Certainly, I'd be happy to do that. I'll start with the position request, if that's all right, President Pecoraro.
Sure, that's fine.
So we received a request, I think as the mayor noted, from both Mr. Davidson as well as Mr. Strasberg, who is our street superintendent. Mr. Davidson requested a full-time position that we've been calling a help desk attendant. The total cost of this position with benefits is $82,473. The cost of this position, like most positions in technology, would be split equally among general sewer and the water fund. So it comes out to roughly $27,500 per fund. Mr. Strasberg requested 1 or 2 equipment operators. The cost of 1 equipment operator with benefits is $71,175. The cost of 2 equipment operators is basically double that, so it's $142,350. Any position for the street department is funded 100% in the general fund. I would note that we did give the street department an additional equipment operator in the current year budget, FY 2021, which certainly has helped some. And so that's kind of the recap of the position request. With regard to the Evergreen study, I'll just sort of go through what their scope of work was. We did execute a contract with them at the end of calendar year 2020. They conducted on behalf of the city a salary survey, and they collected salary range data from 17 of the city's public sector peers. That survey included trying to get data for 67 of our benchmark position classifications, which represents a cross-section across our organization and salary grades. Evergreen found an average number of matches for each classification of 6.8, meaning that 6.8 on average jurisdictions, we had a match for that, or 6.8 jurisdictions actually had a match that was equivalent to the city's position. But obviously there were 17 public sector peers that were surveyed, so not all peers had matches for all of the city's 67 benchmark classifications. What Evergreen found was on average, the difference between the city's current pay structure and the results of that survey was we were kind of off, if you will, by approximately 6.3% at the range minimum, 3.2% at the range midpoint, and 1.2% at the maximum of the pay grade. So one of the questions, which I thought was a very good question that was asked during the Finance Committee's discussion of the recommendations was, how are we behind after everything we have done? And I think the short answer is, as you all likely recall, we phased in the results of the prior Evergreen study, phased that in over 3 years because we were substantially behind. What our assumption is that happened is the market was moving while we were still phasing in the results of the prior study. So what Evergreen has recommended, based on the survey data, was that the city shift its pay structure by 3% to catch up with the market midpoint. What that means by shifting 3% is all of the city's minimums, midpoints, and maximums of its salary ranges would shift by 3%. Their proposed pay plan does retain the following design features of the city's current pay structure, which is it's an open range pay plan, meaning there are no steps. It would retain the current 19 pay grades, and it would continue the current range spreads, which is the difference between minimum and maximum of 60%. Evergreen also went through and looked at the positions. There were a number of positions where the market shifted fairly substantially, much more than 3% over the last couple of years. So Evergreen has recommended that certain positions in police and public works, and I use public works fairly broadly to include both water and wastewater, as well as utilities. They are proposing that certain positions be reclassified to sort of take into account that significant market shift. So as President Pecoraro and Mayor Dominic both alluded to, Evergreen gave the city 3 separate alternatives. I guess if I had to sum it up, the difference between the 3 alternatives, which certainly do have cost implications, is that option 1 would be the most aggressive in moving employees towards midpoint and would do the most to mitigate any resulting compression issues. Option 3 would be the least aggressive option in moving employees towards midpoint and consequently would do the least in terms of alleviating compression issue. And option 2 is sort of a kind of a middle of the road approach. I think a lot of where you go forward has to do with if you add new positions, because certainly there's only so much money and the impact of adding positions has different ramifications for the funds. If the Mayor and Common Council chose to go with option 1, which once again would be the most aggressive in moving employees towards midpoint and would do the most to alleviate compression, it is affordable. We would slightly exceed the amount of the general fund surplus, which currently stands at about $414,000, but is likely fiscally manageable, mainly because there's inevitably going to be some line items that come in under budget over the course of FY 2022. I would say that option 1 is affordable, assuming that no new positions are added in fiscal year 2022. Option 2, which once again is sort of the middle of the road option, and therefore it's a lower cost, would allow the addition of the help desk attendant position, because once again, the cost of that position would be split among general, water, and sewer. It would not, however, allow for any additional equipment operator positions for streets. And once again, they did get a position in the current fiscal year. Option 3, which would be the least aggressive option in moving employees towards midpoint and would do the least to alleviate compression, would allow the addition of the help desk attendant position and 1 equipment operator position. But there is no Evergreen option would allow the addition of all 3 staffing requests to be met. My advice to the Mayor and Common Council is I would either go with option 1 or option 2. Obviously, we tried to make a great deal of headway over the last 3 years in addressing salary compression issues. And I would at least suggest that you try to go with option 2, which once again would only allow the addition of the help desk attendant position, but no additional positions for streets. So I think that's sort of a brief overview of the Evergreen recommendations. I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Matthews. Mr. Mayor?
Mr. President. So I've been thinking a lot about this because I think both are really important. And I know we have this federal money coming in.
So can I just real quick, remember, we haven't seen any of this. So we have no idea what these numbers are. You
No.
guys all saw it, but the 3 of us have never seen the study. We don't know what numbers we're talking about. I have no idea what the amounts are in these. The only numbers I've seen so far are those position amounts. So Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but you guys are working from, you've already seen this in finance. We have not. So I'd like to before we get into any type of discussion or comments, I need a little more information.
Yeah, Ms. Matthews, are you in a position to put up on the screen the Evergreen file that you shared with us earlier that showed the cost of the three alternatives?
I would have to dig for it, but I can provide the numbers that Councilmember Kavachi is requesting,
Right.
if that would be helpful.
I've got them, I apologize, I thought everybody had these. I'm sending them to the group. I know that people have their laptops here and may have their email available, so I just,
If you did, I apologize.
no, I just sent it to you just this moment.
Oh, just now?
Just,
Oh, okay, yeah.
as we're
Okay.
speaking, I just sent it to you so you can pull it up and take a look at it.
Well, why don't we also say what they are, so.
Yes, but we can.
Yeah, if I may, so as I mentioned, if the pay
I'm sorry,
structure,
Mr. Mayor, by the way.
That's right.
if the pay structure shifts by 3%, and positions are reclassified, there is sort of a fixed cost regardless of what option you pick, assuming you accept Evergreen's recommendations for the position reclassifications and 3% shift. That would simply be needed to bring employees to the minimum of the new range. That's not every single employee, but it is a number of employees. So
How
that-
many is the number?
Do you want it by fund, Councilmember Kavachi, or just total?
Total number.
A total to bring employees to minimum would be $395,534. That cost is inclusive of the impacts on fringe benefits. I'll go ahead and give you the options for 1, 2, and 3, and the numbers I'm about to give you are inclusive of that bring to minimum cost, so it is not on top of it. For option 1, the total financial impact is $663,978. Option 2 is $556,882, and option 3 is $501,061.
I don't want to hijack this, but can I ask one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
How many, in the 3% increase, you said that's not everyone, that's only certain positions? I'm not talking about option 1, 2, or 3. I'm talking about the 3% bump that you referred to, because they're two different things, correct? Base salary cost increase is what it's called on this what you just emailed us.
Yes, right.
So how many people does that affect? It's not everyone, right?
It is not everyone. It is a significant number of employees, Councilmember Kavachi. I apologize. I can try to find that information while you all discuss it, but it is over 100 employees. I would need to look for the specific
And
number.
what's our total number of employees right now?
It varies from any given day, but it's normally about 156 to 158 full-time employees.
So 2/3 roughly.
Yes, and
Okay.
I'll try to see if I can find that number while you all talk.
I just felt like we needed to understand
No,
before we could go any further.
I understand, it's fine. Thank you.
Mr. President, I also have a follow-up.
All right, so let's do a few questions first, and then I think the mayor has a recommend, something he'd like to
Can I
propose, but
actually
yes, you go ahead. please.
potentially ask this, please?
Yes, go ahead.
But Councilman Kavachi asked about the 3% increase and how many that affected. How about the reclass? How many people is that affecting? And because that's two separate things, so I'm a little, I kind of just want clarification as to how many people are affected by the 3% increase, and are they the same people that's going to be affected by the reclass? Or are they two different categories? How's that working out?
Once again, I apologize. I was not advised to be prepared for tonight, so I'm doing the best I can. If you can give me a few minutes, I will see if I can dig in my work files and try to find that information for you, Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. President, for letting me
Sure,
ask.
thank you, certainly. Are there any other questions? So before we get into discussing, the substance?
I got one I need, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All
I
right,
appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, sorry.
Well, Mr. President, I think what would be helpful is, and I don't believe this was covered yet, the cost of those 3 positions.
She went over.
Does she want to reach one? Okay, I was reading it. Okay.
It was 82.4 for the
Okay.
help desk and 142 for both positions and streets.
For both, okay, gotcha. I just wanted to make sure that was out there because we're going to be discussing all of that. So we have this federal money coming. Legislation's passed. I think they were pretty clear on what we can't use it for. We can't use it for, I believe there's 2 buckets. Mr. President, correct me if I'm wrong, but we discussed this earlier. It's you can't use it you can't add it into a pension pension fund, and you can't use it to lower taxes. Now,
And you have to spend it within a certain amount of time.
yeah, it has to be spent within, I think it's 2024, I believe. Yes, I don't know if that's fiscal year 2024 or what, but that's, so you have, at least 3 years to spend it. Half the money should be coming, I believe, within the next like 30 days. So before the budget is passed, totally finalized, I think that should be here. And then the other half, we should get within a year. So that's what they're saying. And, a couple of places that the money is really meant to go toward are economic development and emergency services. So, and of course, any extra costs related to the pandemic, but that's really the focus. So what I'm thinking is, because I think both of these things are important and it's hard to just choose between one or the other. And then you have to, kind of pick, you're kind of half fixing things. You're not really fixing anything at that point. If you're kind of choosing both. But between that money coming in and a couple of other factors, one of them being, if you look at our debt schedule and what debts we have, what's coming off over the next 2-3 years, I think we have some more flexibility in the budget than it feels like. So I think the thing that makes me extra really comfortable with this is the fact that debts will be coming off over the next few years that will free up some money. And I know that they all come out of different buckets, but we also know that there are things you can do to, there are things that can come out of multiple buckets. One of them is right now out of the general fund, we have money that's coming out from the operating budget for Magic and for the fire department, both of which are things that could be, they both fall under the priorities of this federal funding. So, in terms of economic development, emergency services. So looking at those as like an annual payment, and we know that, there may be changes with Magic in the next few years. There may be changes with we know there are going to be changes with the fire department over the next few years with what's going on with them in the county and how things are shifting there. I just wonder if there's a way we could free up some money in the operating budget by using the federal money to pay those grants forward for 3 years, or not really. I know you can't really fund a future budget, but if if you paid for the equivalent of what 3 years would be, with the expectation that there would not be, that there wouldn't be the money the 2 years following. And I also know that when you get lumps of money like that, organizations can be smarter with how they spend it, because they can plan a little better and use it differently. So I think they would most likely welcome this. This isn't something I've discussed with anybody, but I believe they would welcome it, and it would free up $330,000 in the operating budget. We know that over time properties are going to increase. We know that debts are going to be paid off. And the good thing about these debts being paid off, and I know that's coming out of out of capital, but I think a good thing with debts being paid off is that this money coming from the federal government is going to be able to go to places that would be the likely reasons for us to add more debt. So if we had to add debt back as those debts came off, as we probably would under normal circumstances, if a bridge needs something or roads need something, we may need to take out a bond for those things. This could likely keep us from having to do that for multiple years. And even further, I know we have to spend it by 2024, but there are things that we can do within those 3 years that'll keep us from taking out, debts in years to come from that. So I think there is some room here. The money's coming. The legislation, I think, is pretty. I think it's broad for a reason. I think they want you to have flexibility with this money, and I think they're pretty strict on what they said you couldn't use it for. So I think this is a really safe move. So I would like to do both, and that's how I'd like to do it. Now I know I just dropped a pretty big idea on everybody, and it's probably going to take some research and everything. But I wanted to start that discussion. I think it's a way to solve those problems.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would anybody else like to?
Mr. President.
Mr. Kalachi.
So first of all, Mr. Mayor, I love that idea. It's money we already know we're going to spend. We have kept that $250,000 for the fire department steady since I've been on the council, and probably long before. And I think there's no doubt we wouldn't continue to do that up until the time the county takes over. And I don't think that's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. So that's $750,000 that we could send to them with the understanding that that would be their next 3 years worth of funding, but they're going to get it all in one lump sum. I can't imagine any organization would have a problem with that, but we don't know. So we'll have to talk about it. Same thing with Magic, that's 240, and it takes 330, is that right, out of the operating budget for the next 3 years, which would certainly help go a long way to what we want to do here. I'd say we can even take that a step further, that line of thinking in terms of, if I'm not mistaken, you said infrastructure is one of the items that is allowable, correct? Where we can spend this money, right?
Yes, and I think something else to clarify there is infrastructure, I feel like, is being used very broadly. So things that, so like infrastructure, they're also, it's just like housing and things like that. So there's a lot of places that this could be spent. So,
we have things like road work that needs to be done. We know that's coming. And that their areas, and I don't want to get into the minutia of that because we'll have to spend more time than we're going to be able to do tonight. But similarly, we may be able to pay it forward on some of those projects that carry us out for many years, that allows us then funding to put towards this or other things. Because money's fungible, as I know the council president's very fond of saying, and he's right. So I think we take your line of thinking, Mr. Mayor, and apply that not just to these two areas, but I think we can do that in other areas as well, to use it wisely, not just blow it, but it also allows us to do a lot for the employees, which I think we all want to do, as well as potentially funding those positions and keeping us, fiscally sound. So I like it a lot. I think it's a great line of thinking, and I'd like us to expand on that, to use that funding elsewhere to do exactly what you're talking about. That's my comment, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Kavachi. Anyone else wish to be heard on this?
Mr. President,
Mr. Yingling?
I just have 2 questions.
Certainly.
Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming up with this idea. I know we talked briefly about it. I've expressed some reservation. I guess I have a question for staff. Can we get, I guess, whatever the guidelines are from the federal government, kind of the fine print of like what we can or can't spend this on? I know you two are much more familiar with it than I am, Mr. President and Mr. Mayor. Certainly like to educate myself on that. And then question for staff as well, obviously I'm sure they're aware of the amount of money. Like, what is that dollar amount? Like, when are we getting it? I know you said a couple weeks, but like, what does that schedule look like specifically?
If I may, Councilmember Yingling, what I can provide to you all is the packet of information that I received from Senator Cardin's office. As is the case with most federal legislation, the devil will be in the details, and the Treasury Department has not published those yet. So the information that is available at this point in time, that would probably be most relevant to the city. There is reference in the legislation to water and sewer infrastructure, which obviously affects only the water and sewer fund. There is a specific reference in the legislation about the expansion of broadband. Presumably that would assist the city as it's trying to build the network out into the county. I think as was said, there is specific language regarding basically supplanting and using it to reduce taxes, which you're obviously not talking about. But other than what has come from Senator Cardin's office, which they were kind enough to provide shortly after the legislation was enacted and signed by the president, there is no guidance at this point. I did receive some information, I believe it was last week, from MML, basically just talking about local governments positioning themselves to receive the funding. If you don't have a DUNS number, for example, you were encouraged to get one. If you're not enrolled in the SAM system, you were encouraged to do so. And the city has those basic fundamentals covered because we do receive federal funding for our housing program. But beyond that, the Treasury Department simply has not published the guidelines. And that's where you would need to look for very specific guidance once that information is released. In terms of the amount, we're looking at somewhere, based on, once again, from the information from Senator Cardin's office, of a little over $15 million. It was going to be released in what they referred to as kind of 2 tranches. Unlike some funding, this will come directly from the state to the city. So I believe part of it was in 30 days and the remainder was about 30 days later.
So I just forwarded everybody a copy of that report, that Senator Cardin has distributed. So you all could take a look at it. And as the mayor mentioned, the only 2 prohibitions are that you cannot use it to support a pension fund or offset a tax cut. And the funds are supposed to be expended by the end of 2024. So we've got, a couple of years to do this with.
Mr. President.
Just one thing. So then, the allowable uses are to respond to or mitigate the COVID-19 health emergency or its negative economic impacts, to provide essential workers with premium pay, to cover revenue loss incurred as a result of the COVID-19 emergency, or to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So, obviously we've got more information to gather on exactly, what the best ways to do this are. I think that, we've got to be very smart about this because it's a large amount of money and we want to make sure that we're making, wise decisions about it. But I think that, within that, there is considerable room for us to, to be able to take, without sort of making any specific plans at this moment as to how we want to use those funds, because I think we've still got some more research to do. I think there is considerable opportunity to act along the lines that the mayor is suggesting.
Mr. President.
Mr. England.
Okay, no, thank you. I appreciate that information. So other than, just so I'm understanding, other than contributing the pension.
Right.
And reducing taxes.
Right, and that's largely to make
This is
clear.
like unrestricted funds by
Right.
the federal.
And
government.
you realize, and I know in your business, you realize this very well, a lot of communities across the country are in trouble with their pension programs, right? That pension programs are underfunded. They're looking at big shortfalls, and Congress didn't want people to shore those up, with this money. That's certainly not one of our issues. We're part of the Maryland Fund, which is well funded and carefully managed. And of course, the tax cut is not something we were contemplating.
Yeah, sure.
So
But the funds are like otherwise unrestricted, it sounds like.
that's right. Sounds like that to me as well.
Mr. President.
Mr. Mayor.
I think a lot of the funding that's come out through the pandemic that was, meant to target issues caused by the pandemic have been broad. If you look at, you look at a lot of the way the funding's gone, to businesses and so forth. I think a lot of it's meant to stimulate the economy. I don't see it being, everything that I've heard from different representatives, at MML meetings and so forth. I think the expectation is that this is going to be pretty broad, and I think the wordings suggest that, and I think that there's enough places that this could be used that even if my specific, idea wouldn't work or would only partially work, I think that it still would free up what we need to do this. But that's just that's my opinion, and I think we discussed this. I think you bring up good points. I think those are things we have to just consider. But I think that this money's being given with the expectation that they're going to give a lot of broad options for municipalities and local government. And two, we got to remember this money that the 15.8 or whatever it is. I think 15 point something isn't the only money we're going to probably get as a city from this legislation. There's going to be other money that's meant for specific things, especially things like water, sewer, broadband that we're likely going to be able to apply for and get on top of this money. So I think there's other opportunities for us to make some headway in other areas as well.
Well, there's certainly aid that goes to the state that the state will probably use to pass on in different programs. In addition to that, there's the next program, which is the infrastructure bill, which we don't know what the final form of that is going to be, but I think there's every likelihood that some program will pass, of significant, which is going to be targeted at, physical infrastructure to a large extent, roads, bridges, broadband, things like that. And we certainly will have access, to some of that funding as well to be able to, hopefully do some things that the city needs to do. So I think that the challenge for us in the next couple of years is really going to be two things. One is to make wise investments with that money, and two is to make sure that the city accesses all the money that's available to it. And we're going to need, as we work with, the new city administrator and the rest of the staff, make sure that we're on top of what those opportunities are to either apply for or to make sure that we're receiving the funds that, that will be coming our way in those areas.
Well, Mr. President.
Mr. Kavachi.
I think that, we need to probably agree in principle. And when I say we, what I really mean is you, Councilwoman Gilbert, and Councilman Dayhoff, because the three of you are guaranteed to be here in about 3 weeks. The three rest of us may or may not, well, you two will definitely not be here, and I may or may not be here. So I think it's important that we go, if we move forward with one of these options and the 3%, we've got to understand that that's in perpetuity. So that's spending anywhere from $660,000 a year down to 501 on the low side, if we choose one of those options, which I'm guessing we're all in agreement, we're going to do something. We have to move forward with the understanding that we're going to take and ensure that funding goes towards, is applied in a manner that's going to carry that forward for years to come, not short term, because this never goes away. These increase, they not only don't they never go away, they grow as time goes on with inflation and things like that. So I think it's important, and I guess I'm really looking again at the three of you, maybe me, that we have to agree in principle that that's how we're going to proceed once we have it, and then we can start using it. I'm glad that you brought out the fact that it is mostly unrestricted, and we know that we have things that are going to cost us money over the long run that also may allow us, where revenue's generated. For instance, with Ting, we have revenue being generated, but of course that's all being sucked up on debt service. Well, if we can turn that into positive revenue generation by eliminating some of that debt service, well, then all of a sudden we've got additional revenue streams. And there's probably other things like that that we can look at as well. So I don't think, again, in this workshop, we can make those decisions and commitments in the time period, but I think we've got to agree in principle that that's what we're going to do if we're going to then move forward with the discussion on budgeting some of this or all of this evergreen study.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does to me, yes. So,
Mr. President,
Mr. Yingling.
can I just, Mr. Councilman Kavachi just said something that I wanted to clarify. When I was talking about unrestricted, I wasn't saying necessarily that I think it's unrestricted. I was pointing out that we're making these decisions based on the assumption that it's unrestricted without knowing specifically the Department of the Treasury details. That was what I was saying. But that's all.
Right. And I think that's a good point. And that's why, I said, while I agree in principle with what the mayor is suggesting, I think it's difficult at this moment to earmark any of that money for specific things. I think we're going to have to continue to do some research and figure out exactly what we're able to use it for. But the fact is, as Mr. Kavachi mentioned, I've said before, one thing, regardless of what bucket the money winds up in, it will allow us to do certain things which will free up other monies that will allow us to do other things. So I think that we need to, well, we can't sort of go wild, and we want to be cautious and we want to be thoughtful about this. And I think it does afford us opportunities if we plan it well.
Just a quick clarification. No, I agree. I just something crossed my mind. What if we, on the topic of compensation, what if we, picked option, whatever, 2, okay? And then after you get the federal money and you get clarification on that money, I mean, the next council could just basically do budget amendments and allocate that money and even change the, if, let's say we picked option 2 because we wanted to, for whatever reason, and I'm just using option 2 as an example. You could, if you finally got the money and it was all good to use for, something, and then you could just move money around after the fact, after you actually received it and then had like the details of that. Is that wrong or?
I think that would be the case. What would also be the case is that, we would be able to, once we've gotten the money and understand, how we're going to be able to use it, in the next budget, we could take the plan the rest of the way, and do, fulfill, take it the rest of the way and get to where we really want to be. We don't, it's nice to be able to do it all in one leap, but we don't have to do it all in one leap. The important thing, I think, is to make progress. And I think as Ms. Matthews noted earlier, and the mayor and I talked about this earlier today, what we've frequently had to do because we've had budget restraints is we've had to move very cautiously in the direction of getting to where we want to go. We've had to always take the least expensive option, and it's taken us longer to get there. We probably don't have to do that in this case. We don't have to start with the least expensive option. We can pick one of the more expensive options without picking the most expensive option, expecting that a year from now, we'll be able to go the rest of the way, as opposed to say we're going to have to space it out over 3, 4, 5 years, as we sometimes had to do in the past.
Yeah, just.
So, we can exercise a certain amount of caution without, and still make pretty good progress. Anyone else? Mr. Dayhoff?
Yes. Option number 3 allows for the IT position, and it allows for 1 or 2 of the public works employees.
It allows for one of the public works.
No, option 3 allows for none. I think option 3 is just the help desk position.
No,
Option 2 is 1, option 3 is all 3, I think.
No, option 3 allows for the help desk and 1 equipment operator.
But option 1 is all of
Option
them.
1 doesn't allow for any,
Why is then option one having the greatest impact?
because option 1, takes the salaries farther. In one stroke, it fulfills.
Oh, I
the,
see.
the goals of the
Yeah, that made it clearer for me
Okay.
also.
I didn't
Okay,
understand that either.
So option 1, the base salary cost increase is the greatest increase.
That's right.
Does that also include the reclassifications?
Ms. Matthews, does that include the reclassifications?
Yes, all of the figures I gave you include the reclassifications. So even the bring to minimum figures are largely being driven by the 3% shift in the pay structure as well as the reclassifications.
Thank you.
So may I ask another question?
Sure.
If we're adding 3% increase to all of our staff, or, okay, not all of our staff, 75% of our staff,
Councilmember Gilbert, may I clarify something?
please.
A 3% shift in the pay structure does not mean each and every employee is getting a 3% raise. It's simply a shift in the structure. It is going to drive the necessity to bring some employees to minimum, but I do want to clarify that it does not mean every employee gets 3%. There's a difference between the structure and how employees move through that structure, if that makes sense.
I guess I'm having trouble figuring out how that's supposed to fix the initial problem that we have.
Well, I also have.
The differentials in our salaries.
Right, if I may, Councilmember Gilbert, you had asked a question and I was trying to pull files while you all were talking. So if the mayor and common council accept Evergreen's recommendation to shift the pay structure, meaning all minimums, midpoints, and maximums increase by 3%, and you accept the reclassifications, there will be 92 employees whose salary needs to be brought up to the minimum. I was trying to scroll through the files and truthfully, there are 3 different versions of the files, each one that is over 50 columns across. So I think these numbers are reasonably good. It appears that whether it's option 1, 2, or 3, there would be a total of 148 employees who would get adjustments to varying degrees. That does include those 92 who would need to be brought up to minimum. What's going to be the difference between options 1, 2, and 3, as best as I can tell, looking at it fairly quickly, is the percentage increase that those 148 employees would get under each of the options. So I hopefully that information is somewhat helpful to you.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Gilbert?
I believe that helps out a little bit. And when you say minimum, can you define what that minimum means? You don't mean 92 of our employees will now be receiving minimum wage, I would hope.
No, I'm sorry.
Just
no,
want
no,
to clarify that.
No, we have no benefited employees who are making minimum wage. It would be the minimum of the pay range associated, pay grade associated with that particular employee's position.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Mr.
And
Kavachi?
I want to just clarify one thing that I misunderstood, and I want to say it out loud because maybe I'm not the only one, but maybe I am. The option 1, 2, and 3 they didn't have anything to do with those positions being added.
That's
What
right.
confused me was when Ms. Matthews was talking about it, she was then saying what we may or may not be able to do. So I misunderstood thinking that was built in. It's not. Because again, remind you,
Right.
we didn't see this until,
That's right.
we're looking at this the first
Right.
time. So
So,
we didn't have the luxury. So I want to make sure I'm clear. Option 1, 2, and 3 are strictly decompression and or movement into a higher level of being within the norm compared to our peers. That has nothing to do with the adding of those 3 positions.
that's
The
right.
adding of those 3 positions is $223,000 a year if we were to add all 3, in addition to these other 3 options. Am I correct in that?
You are correct, Councilmember Kavachi. The only way that any of the Evergreen study comes into play with the new positions is we did assume that the pay structure would shift. And we use the new minimums in terms of calculating the cost, but you are correct. They're 2 separate buckets of numbers.
So to then take that a step further, so if we were to pick option 1 at 663 and add all 3 positions, we're talking about increasing the budget close to $1 million a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Across all funds.
Across all funds, right, because one of those, that general fund for the help desk is only 27,000, so.
Right, and keeping it, so the problem is, this is affordable with the sewer and the water funds. The challenge is how much can we afford
In the
with the general fund?
So the water and sewer fund, that's a great point, Mr. President. The water and sewer fund can manage the help desk position, and we don't need to look at that. That's already in their budget, so it's allowing for that.
No,
No,
President.
we added in.
Mr.
no, the help desk position is technology, so it's not a water sewer fund.
It is, it's being split between the 3.
Help desk, help desk is, I guess that would be split between the 3. Okay, I guess so.
27,000 per
I
fund.
guess so. Yes, and I just want to clarify because everyone I feel like is on a better or closer to the same page now.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I was suggesting earlier, so we would have to choose between either going option 1 and none of the new positions, or some kind of, compromise between the 2 and have option 2 or 3 and some of the positions, or have all the positions and then be able to do very little with, with current staff pay. So what I would, just to be clear, what I was suggesting was to allow to do all 3 staff positions and option 1 for this year's budget. So I just want to clarify that because I don't think we were all on the same page going into that conversation. So.
Now,
Council President Pecoraro, if I may.
Sure, Ms. Matthews.
To Councilmember Kavachi's comments, I'm going to see if I can share this screen that might be helpful. If you can just give me a moment. Well, it's giving me a little bit of trouble. I apologize for that.
Does she have permission to share, Ms. Visconski?
Yeah, this should be it. Yeah, so what is on your screen is the breakdown by fund of both bringing to minimum and options 1, 2, and 3. So as you can see, the fund that is taking the largest hit, if you want to call it that, of any of the evergreen options, once you get beyond bringing people to minimum, is clearly the general fund. It's almost 60, I think it's roughly 65% of the cost. So that is the fund, once again, that will be seeing the impact of the Evergreen implementation. And once again, to Councilmember Kavachi's comments, these numbers do not include have nothing to do with the new positions. They're not reflected in these numbers.
And Mr. President,
Mr. Gavache.
correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the reason that the general fund is going to be taking the biggest hit is because the police department is probably the biggest recipient of these adjustments. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's going to be primarily, as I mentioned, what we saw in the market was certain public works positions and police positions. So there certainly would be a lot of reclassifications at the lower levels in the police department, which once again is 100% the general fund. You would also see that across any and all of the public works units, including streets, the entry-level streets position.
But they're spread out over water and sewer to some extent as well, correct? Some of them.
No, the streets position.
No, not streets. I'm talking about, I meant just public works, not streets. Public works, some of those employees are also within water and sewer, correct?
Correct. Anyone who's at the water plant is obviously in the water fund, same for wastewater, and then anyone in utility maintenance. For the most part, there are a few exceptions, but they're generally split 50-50 between water and
Yeah,
sewer.
that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
But the positions we're talking about adding, I think, are just in the streets department.
And they can't be split. They're not split between the three funds, correct?
That's correct.
Only the help desk person is split.
That's right.
Okay.
That's correct, isn't it, Ms. Matthews? That's Mr. Glass's request?
I'm sorry, where it's in the street department, that is correct.
Yes, thank you. So I think that helps make it clear to everybody. Thank you. So I think that, sort of looking at the discussion here, and, one of the questions I have is, assuming for the moment, because we have not yet received any of these funds and we do not know, and we don't have as much clarity as we'd like to have on how to spend them. So that decision is down the road, although we know we will have that opportunity. In the short term, as we enact a budget, which by law must be balanced, my question is, if we act along the lines that the mayor is suggesting, how do we call this a balanced budget when the revenue, the revenue that we have is not sufficient to cover the entire cost? Ms. Matthews, have you been able to give that some thought?
Basically, you would be digging into reserves, is what would be happening.
So we would have to allocate funds from our reserves to cover the cost in the current budget year, with the expectation that during the coming fiscal year, we would be able to make adjustments to the budget based on other revenues that we would receive that would allow us to, to sort of fix that, for future years.
That is the assumption you would have to make, correct?
Okay, all right, thank you. I just think it's important that we all understand that.
That's an excellent
Well,
point.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor,
that's certainly one way to do it. I think the line items I mentioned earlier, if you remove those from the budget with the expectation that they would be funded with this money. I know at that point, it probably start making some people nervous, but I don't think anybody wants to not fund those things. I don't think there's any reason to be, although I understand why some people may.
Yeah.
That's the other way to do it.
well, it is, except that, we don't have the clarity on how those, and I suspect that we will be able to do what you're talking about, but I think we have questions to answer about, how we make the multi-year commitment, and things like that. So I'm not saying we won't ultimately do what you're suggesting. I'm just saying that I think that as we enact a budget, for, that's gonna pass the legal muster for the next couple of weeks, that we need to think about, what our options are, how we're gonna do this.
And one of the things that is in my mind, I guess, that I'd just like to put out there so people don't think I'm just being irresponsible, is that I know that we have to, we're passing a budget here in the next few weeks, but the budget won't actually take place until after we've gotten the first lump of this money. And I think that, I think that whatever we do, I think we do it in a safe way. It's just that there's going to be maybe a couple weeks, if that, in between us passing a budget, if that even happens, and having that money in hand. So it's just, I guess, tough timing, but
Yes, and so just to make clear, our fiscal year begins on July 1st. So we have to enact a budget prior to July 1st, unlike Congress, who usually takes their time. But we have to enact a budget before July 1st to be in compliance with the law. And that budget by law must be balanced. And so, those are the two, that's what we have to ensure as we make these final decisions here, which we'll have to make at the next meeting.
Mr. President, may I ask a question?
Ms. Gilbert.
So obviously we have to enact and pass a budget that's balanced. Can we amend the budget before it starts in July, or do we have to wait?
We can amend it anytime we like.
So theoretically, if we pass a budget on our next meeting, May 28th, and I'm just throwing that date out because I don't even know when May 28th falls. We receive the 15 or half of the $15 million. It sounds like we get it in pieces. We could then change and amend our budget to reflect option 1 and the 3 positions.
Ms. Colson's having a heart attack right now.
so, Mr. President. Mr. President.
Sweating bullets right this minute.
That's right. So, yeah, Mr. Mayor.
So that brings up a good point. So I think one of the reasons that I would like to, pass the budget the one way as opposed to the others, I think that's the most likely end outcome. And it would create the least amount of work and like double work having to be done to pass a budget, have everything set up, and then redo it. So my thing is I was just trying to get the most likely end result through, but I understand that the more cautious way would be to do it the other way, which is probably create more work, changing things down the line. So I think that's really what it comes down to. I mean, if we all even agree on what we want that end piece to be. So if we do, or a majority does, then there's 2 ways to kind of cut it. You have the way that's probably the most cautious. I think the other way is probably still pretty cautious. It's just, it'll save some work, and obviously there's a small chance it could change, but I think it's less of one. So that's it. That's all I have to say about that.
So why don't we do this? Because, obviously we do want to, to make sure that we do this in a fashion that is both sensible and legal. Why don't we ask the staff to give this a little bit of thought over the next couple of days and come back to us, Ms. Matthews and Ms. Colston, with your thoughts, because, we don't want to put you on the spot right now, but come back to us with your thoughts on what makes the most sense in order, if we want to sort of meet these goals, that we've discussed tonight, of whether or not the best way to do it is to do something along the lines of what the mayor suggested as an option is, or does it make more sense to, take some funds out of the reserve funds with the expectation that, we will very shortly be able to replace them or deal with that in another way. So.
I would have no problem, Council President Pecoraro, giving you my recommendation this evening. Ms. Colston may have a different opinion.
Okay.
I would always say that you should make decisions based on the information you have in hand. And I think, there are a lot of nuances to how the city's budget is constructed. There's been discussion about certainly some infrastructure projects, and I'm going to kind of focus on capital projects fund and the general fund. As a reminder, we balanced the capital projects fund this year by taking $430,000 and transferring it from the general fund from the sale of West End Place. In the absence of that, significant cuts would have had to be made in capital. And you've got probably several years before projects fall off. I think if clearly there seems to be interest in funding certain positions, option 2 from Evergreen, I think would be a reasonable approach to make some movement for employees to, move towards midpoint or market. It would allow you to fund the help desk attendant position that Mr. Davidson has requested. I would suggest if that is what your priorities are, you proceed in that direction and you hold off on doing anything for the street department until you have more clarity from the Treasury Department in terms of what that funding is going to look like and what it's going to be used for. The other thing I would just note is, I think there was a mention, and I apologize, I can't recall who brought it up, about the fiber fund debt service. And just as a reminder, that debt cannot be paid off for at least 10 years. That is a CDA requirement. So the city will have those debt service payments. I think we're about a year or so into it for at least another eight or 9 years. Because there is the CDA loan documents always have a provision that you can't pay it off until you've basically gone 50% into the maturity. So that problem is still going to be looming for the city. So I don't know, Ms. Colston, if you have a recommendation to the contrary, but that is certainly what I would recommend you do. It's certainly very easy if the financial picture, once you have more information from the Treasury Department, is favorable. It certainly would not be very difficult for Ms. Colston to basically make the necessary budget adjustment to add 1 or 2 positions to the street department.
Mr. President, I would like
Ms.
to just,
Colston. Sure.
I would like to add that my opinion falls along the same lines as Ms. Matthews, in that option 2, I believe, is the reasonable option to provide the positions that are desperately needed, while also giving us that flexibility further on in the year to make that amendment once we have more information on the federal funds that are going to be received. I hesitate in making decisions based on what we believe could happen. I think that's a good way to get in trouble. But like Ms. Matthews said, it would not be a big issue to go back and revise that once we do have more information. But again, option 2 would be that kind of compromise between the 3 options, and giving us the goal of getting us towards that minimum that we want to get to.
Mr. President.
Mr. Cavacci.
So if in fact we end up, so let's say we pick 2 and we fund the help desk position only, which is
Right.
what I believe Ms. Matthews is suggesting. And I think that's reasonable. If we are then later to find out we get the money, we get the federal funding, we're able to put it to things like the mayor is suggesting, and other things like that, would we be able to then mid-year go back and not only fund those 2 positions, but will we also be able to bump from option 2 to option 1, and how challenging would that be?
I don't think it would be all that challenging, Councilmember Cavacci, provided that you don't go retroactive. That's
Right.
where it becomes very messy. But certainly staff would have the files of what that target pay rate would be under option 1 versus option 2. And I would think that should be a relatively, I wouldn't say it's easy, but a relatively easy thing to do, provided you don't try to go retroactive back to July 1st.
And we may know before July 1st that we're getting that money may be in our account by July 1st.
Well,
So,
although we may not have a good plan by then.
but it might allow us to say, hey, okay, now we can go ahead and do the budget amendment if need be.
Right. I mean, my preference, if, as we go forward on this, is that, I think the key to doing the smart thing with whatever funds we receive is to avoid making piecemeal decisions and kind of, piddling it away, before. And I think that the smartest thing we can do is to talk, with some financial advisors, really understand the uses of the money, and make sort of a larger scale plan, so that, we know how it's all going to fit together. And we know how, and that may take us a couple of months. We may not get there by July 1st. It may take us, till, August 1st. But I think that's okay. I think it's smarter, to have a complete picture of how we want to move forward, rather than to, take an action and say, well, gee, if we only waited, to make, all the decisions together, then we could have done other things as well. So I think to me, that's a smart thing to do. And I don't think that I think that we've got lots of possibilities. And we need more information, and we need to get the money in the bank too, so let's figure that part out and see how we can go forward, on how we make those longer decisions. But in the meantime, I think we do have the opportunity, as we plan this budget, to move forward with, salary increases. I think that's clear. I just want to make sure that we manage to get it balanced. I think that's critical. We make sure one way or the other, we balance the budget. And I'm open to, a couple of different possibilities, but I think that's something that we just need to decide on how we want to do that.
Mr. President, what
Mr.
was,
Savachi.
and it's really, I guess, really back at Ms. Matthews. Ms. Matthews, what is the revenue bump that we're receiving from the reassessments? 350?
333, I think.
Yeah, I believe it's about 333,000 in the general fund and roughly 90,000 in the capital projects fund.
Right. The way we've set up, our tax,
Yeah.
goes,
some of the-
part of it goes to the
Right,
right.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to, so it's 556 minus 333. So it's 223 gap on option 2, not counting in the help desk person. So we then need to figure out, at least in the short term, how the budget gets balanced for that 223.
I'm having a little trouble, Councilmember Kavachi, following your 223. Right
I'm
now,
sorry.
the general fund has an unallocated surplus of roughly
Oh.
414,000.
I forgot about that. I'm sorry.
Right, so the cost of option 1 is a little bit over that for the general fund, but as I said, I think it's within $20,000. Once again, that's with no new positions. But it's reasonably manageable.
But that 414 does not is not including the bump from reassessments, or it is?
It is, that is already taken into account.
So set aside thinking about, the assessment funds. It's just the total
Yeah.
amount of money that we still have left to play with.
Yep. So
Is $414,000.
at least it's 142 short on option 2 without a help desk person. Is that right?
Option 2 and.
556 is option 2, almost 557.
Right, but please remember that 556 is across all funds. So,
Oh, see, I guess I don't have that.
Yeah, you got to look at the spreadsheet that I sent you,
yeah, so if I
that
may.
Ms. Matthews put up before.
Yeah, the cost of option 1 in the general fund, once again, this is based on, just the Evergreen study, nothing to do with the new position request. Cost of option 1 in the general fund is $430,498, and you have roughly $414,000 currently sitting as a surplus in the general fund without any added positions.
Option 2 is 356, right?
Right. The cost of option 2 in the general fund is $356,799 in the general fund. And then the cost of option 3 in the general fund is $321,391. So with option 2, you could fully fund option 2 in the general fund and the help desk attendant position with.
383 is those two together, 384. With the help desk position, which is 27.5 out of the general fund, plus
Yeah.
356, right? 68.
380 something, you'd have a little bit.
384.
more.
So 384, 414 minus 384, it leaves us with a little bit of headroom.
A little bit of
And
cushion.
It's $30,000 of headroom.
Right, and that's just with the money that we have
Right.
available, that's unallocated, in the revenues. If we wanted to do something like the mayor was suggesting, to try and fund more, we could do that, and we have a couple of, there are a couple of options. One would be to take money out of, our reserves. The other, would be to, try to make a choice to defer the funding of some other items in the budget,
Mhm.
with the expectation that we would add that back in, within the next month or two, as we were aware that other funds were available.
Mr. President,
Mr. Dayhoff.
What's the number on the unallocated surplus, or is it allocated surplus? What's the number on the allocated surplus?
I don't know offhand.
But it's enough to
I think the
cover.
unallocated surplus is the number that we want to know.
414.
Yeah,
But
roughly.
well, the unallocated within the budget, within the operating funds,
Mhm.
the amount is $414,000.
Right, okay,
But the city has reserves in addition to that,
okay.
which we could draw some, 100,000 or so from.
We could draw to cover option number 2.
Yeah, it'd be a matter of drawing $100,000 or so.
Well, it would actually almost only be on paper if we get the federal funds.
So that's that way, now, Mr. President,
Right. Mr. Dayhoff.
that way we would pass a balanced budget. And
We
then
would.
we could reconfigure things.
Well, and as Mr. Kavachi points out, we might not ever actually have to draw that money
Correct, yeah.
because, we would have hopefully sufficient cash flow to be able to manage for the first couple of months until we manage to get the other things sorted out.
So we seem to be settling upon option number 2.
Mr. President, I'd like to hear what the mayor, it's your budget. I'd like to hear what you want.
It's my budget today, I guess.
If you were with-
Proposal, so I want to hear what you want.
I mean, I guess I'm looking at it a little differently because I understand that, a big part of what decision we make is based on this money where there's a little bit of, I don't think there's a lot of uncertainty with it. I think there's a little bit. But I also think there's a little bit of uncertainty with every piece of the budget, right? It's just that we get used to those things being there, but I mean, we don't know that every revenue source and every expense is going to come in exactly where we plan it. So all of this is planning based on educated, hopefully well-educated guesses. So this is just another one, in my opinion, and I think it's a safe bet. I understand I understand people proceeding with caution too. So that's why I'm not necessarily pushing back. I'm just that's my and I think when it comes to things like this, over my last 4 years, I've been pretty cautious with that. I will say that a lot of this is driven by the fact that I think when I first came in 2017, we did a pay study and we actually made some headway in that first round. And in the last 2 years, well, things were tight and we kind of kept our head above water, or maybe even slipped down a little bit. And so I would like this to be a year that we actually make some more headway. I think option 1's the way to do it. So I'm looking for ways to be able to do the things that we need to do. And I think we really should do what we can to do option 1. And we should do what we can to provide those positions, especially since we've been putting those off for a year now. Not putting them off, but we made the decision in the last budget to not add them. And I think it's very doable. And I think every decision we make for the budget comes with a certain level of risk. I don't think any of this is, I don't think any of it exceeds my risk tolerance. I think it's all pretty safe bet. So, that's my piece that you're asking for, but I think I pretty much already said most of that. I just, I just think we need to realize that the budget's it's never, in stone. So.
Ms. Matthews? Or Ms. Colston, whoever can answer this question. What would be I know we've thrown a couple different numbers around. What's the actual dollar figure if we wanted to, of both the help desk position to the general fund as well as one of the public works positions?
If you can give me a moment, I can give you.
Sure. Yeah, if you could figure that out, that would be.
It's 98,000 to the general fund.
It's roughly 100,000,
100,000, okay.
roughly, yes. One equipment operator and the help desk attendant that's the general fund cost, which is what I believe
So-
you're asking for.
So it seems to me, if the council wanted to act along the lines that the mayor is suggesting, that funding option 1 would take all of the unallocated surplus that we have right now, the $414,000, plus a little bit more that could, be made up from different places so you could get to that. And then it's a matter of finding $100,000 perhaps from the city's reserves, perhaps from somewhere else, in order to fund option one and two of the three positions that we'd like to do in order to have the city, clearly on the technology side, providing the assistance, that we need, within that area. And then, on the public works side, providing the citizens with a little extra, help in getting stuff done out, on the city streets.
So, Mr. President,
Mr. Kavachi.
so here's what I'd like to suggest, and this isn't exactly what you just said, so you may disagree. I tend to agree with the mayor. I think option one, and I know this is going to shock you guys coming from me, but I think option one's the right thing to do. And I think we got to take care of the people that we have. We don't have this help desk person, and we don't have these two street departments folks yet.
Mhm.
So what I'm going to suggest is we fund option one and we fund none of those positions right now, because we don't have them anyway.
Mhm.
So we wait and see what comes in, because we're only $16,000 short to do that. We've got 414, that's 430 out of the general fund. That leaves us 16K short. I think we can make up 16K, even if we gotta temporarily earmark it out of reserves. I think we can all live with 16K. I'm more reluctant to then commit to those additional positions until we have that funding in hand, and then it will be easy to do. And I think we can go back, as Mr. Councilman Yingling and Councilwoman Gilbert both suggested, we can go back and look at a budget amendment at some point in time,
Mhm.
maybe even before July 1st, if we have the money to potentially add those positions. There might be a new group that discusses that. But I think we go with option one and fund no positions today. And then look at funding those positions in the near future if we get that funding. That would be my recommendation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kavachi. Mr. Yingling.
The calculations you did right before Mr. Chavachi made his point, you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, in order that we were looking for $100,000, right? Is that right?
Mhm.
That was the difference, right? And that would allow us to do option one
Mhm.
and fund all three
That
positions.
would fund two positions.
We fund two positions.
Fund the help desk position,
Okay,
because that's spread across all three funds. And then, be able to fund one of the equipment operators.
and there's a general fund transfer to shore up the capital improvements that are needed this year, right? Okay. What if? So and these two aren't gonna like this, but there's $200,000 allocated for the Wakefield Valley Park improvements. I know the plan is to get grant money for those improvements. Hopefully next year or whatever year, is that accurate? What if we went and put it at 100,000 and then moved that 100,000 back in to the general fund, that we could fund the two positions and do option one?
Mr. President,
Ms. Gilbert.
how about we just look at the parking study at 190,000 and remove it at the moment, because we're probably not going to be doing that parking study in the next fiscal year, and we can put that off to another year, and there's your 190,000.
We only need 100.
Correct.
Mhm.
So we budgeted 190 on a parking study that most likely we're not going to be using.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Yingling's correct, we only need 100, but that's to fund two positions. If we have 190, we can fund all three.
And that would make me very happy.
And it wouldn't touch the Wakefield money,
And it wouldn't touch the Wakefield money.
and it wouldn't affect anything that we would be planning on doing in the next fiscal year.
But Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
so I think a good point is to be made here is that there are going to be some, we're planning for worst case scenario, for instance, the Wakefield money is most likely going to be handled, through grants. The parking study may or may not be done this year. So somewhere that money is going to open up. So whether we pull it from one or the other, I think that just goes to my point that a lot of these are guesses, and
Right.
so I like either of those plans.
So as I look at this, for the purpose of a work session discussion, there's two things that I think it's important to satisfy. One is, or to do, one is to understand what the will of the council is, right? What is it we want to do? And the second part of that is to have clear in our minds a way to do that, even if it isn't the way we do it, but a way to do it that balances the budget, right? Because we've got to have a balanced budget at the end of this process. So it sounds to me as I listen to all the conversation that it is pretty clear that there is a strong sentiment to be able to fund option one.
Yes.
Is that the case? That seems to be the case to me.
That was my suggestion.
Right. That was, the mayor has been wanting to do that. Mr. Kavachi, that was part of his proposal and everybody seems to be
We all want to.
supportive of that. Right. So that's fine. So then the second part of that is to, is there some consensus on, how we can, recognizing that whatever decision we make on balancing the budget is going to be, transferring funds one way or another from one source or another, one line or another, that is a one-time thing. Because, but we believe that additional funds are going to come in are going to allow us to have a longer term solution. So that's not a problem. And all that we're trying to do is satisfy the fact that we need to have a balanced budget, by July 1st. So it seems to me that, the parking study is a good place, to find those funds right now. And if we decide over the course of the year that because, of development projects that are moving forward more quickly downtown than otherwise might be thought, and we do need to rethink, not parking so much as traffic downtown and some parking, that, we would have the opportunity to go back and backfill that need with, finding the money somewhere else.
President Pecoraro, if I may.
Ms. Matthews.
There were two aspects of the parking study, which was a funded project this year. The RFP has been sitting in my inbox and unable to get to it. One is basically looking at some provisions of the zoning code that have been problematic. The other part, you can certainly set that aside, but we were trying to look at our parking system holistically, but we do not have replacement parts for our meters. So something is going to have to be done with the meters, even if you choose not to do a study that integrates other aspects of the city's parking issues.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
I think that whatever happens with this federal money, meters are a great place to spend part of it.
Meters.
I think
the meters.
I think whether it's this group or the next group, you'll likely have consensus on that because no one likes
And that's
old
key,
meters you can't get parts for.
Right.
So,
Mr. President.
and I think that if we want to position ourselves as a tech forward city, we should have parking meters that, number one, work. Number two, don't require someone to go around and pull change out of them all the time. And number three, accept a credit card or an app. So I think something should be done. But I think certainly the federal money will be able to be used, if not all, to fund that entire thing, at least a good portion of it. So I that wouldn't be like a big concern of mine. I think that would be able to be handled.
Mr. Dehoff, seeking recognition.
Yeah, I think the parking meters easily qualify as key and critical towards economic development. I don't know where we are as far as finding a consensus, but I still want option one in all three employees.
Okay.
That's what I want.
Right.
So maybe our charge is to come back with a budget that includes option one in all three positions.
Right.
Whether it's the parking fund or whether it's the parking fund.
Right.
Or allocated or unallocated surplus or.
Right. All right. So this is a work session. So I think, that's, the way to do this is to, as we've done in the past, is to say, this is where the council wants to go. And, we'll let the staff, interpret that and bring it back in the document that we'll see next week. We have another meeting planned next week when we will be, taking, further look at this, as our budget process indicates. Next week, we'll have budget hearing number 2, if we need one, as well as budget work session. we have another opportunity there. And then the plan is to adopt the budget on May 10th, which I think we're still well on the way to meeting. So why don't we say this to the staff that, the council's, council seems to want to go with option one. With the Evergreen, from the Evergreen study, and to fund all three positions that we have identified. The parking study as an option for finding the additional funds that we need to be able to do that and balance the budget. If staff has a better recommendation, you can provide us by next Monday night. We're certainly open to that. But that we've identified one source and we're open to other things. So I think that would, that gets us out of this box, and we can say that we've at least, found a way forward on this piece of what we need to do. That agreeable to everybody?
Yes,
All right, very good.
I'm
Thank you.
perfectly happy with that.
yes.
Very good.
Ms. Gilbert, nice job.
Yeah,
Pull that out. I'm
Very good.
impressed.
she rocks.
Thank you.
That was well done.
That was
All right.
great.
I did not identify any other major decision points for us tonight. Ms. Matthews, is there something else that you were looking for guidance from us on tonight?
It's any aspect of the budget. It is your budget, so staff is simply looking for your direction.
Right, but I don't think that there's, I think that, yes, the budget is our decision, but I think that, we have a plan on everything else. There's no major issue that needs to be resolved, other than what we just did. Isn't that the case?
We will run the numbers. Do you even need a budget work session at your next meeting then? Or
Well-
just to take that off the agenda?
Would we like to just have one?
We should review.
Mr. President,
Mayor.
I think leaving the agenda item on is good.
I think so.
And if we get there and we all, if we don't need it, we don't need it, but I think we leave it there.
I think that's a wise course. So we'll leave it on for the agenda for next week, and it may only take us a minute to ascertain that we're ready, that we're good to go, or it may take us longer, but I think we should, I don't think it will take us longer. Great. Did anybody have anything else in the budget that they would like to discuss tonight?
One thing,
Mr. Kavachis?
Mr. President, Miss Gilbert and I had a brief discussion over the weekend, and I gave her some information from what I thought, what I believe to be right related to public safety.
Mhm.
She had asked me about some of the costs of some of the implementation of some of these state mandates. I believe I answered them, but I want to just make sure I was right. I was hoping to call the chief today and ask him. I didn't have a chance to do that. So Chief, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
So the camera, the body worn cameras that are that we were already going to do regardless of the state mandate, those cameras include maintenance and replacement over certain periods of time is all part of that fee that we're paying. Is that correct?
Under the proposal with the company that we did the trial with, it would be spread across two separate budget categories, software, I believe, and then in the general fund. So that was proposed to be, that's included in our budget request for this year, and that would cover replacement costs or maintenance issues associated with the cameras.
So that is built into the budget already.
Correct.
Okay, that's what you wanted to know. right?
Yeah, yes, and Mr. President,
Ms. Gilbert?
just to verify, and Chief, I know you and I did kind of speak. The new legislation that's been enacted for a lot of the police officers, we are including some of that. I know the canines, we're not retiring any canine dogs anytime soon, so that kind of doesn't apply right now, but some of the legislation, like the increase in mental health evaluations, have we included that in our budget? Is that a budget line, or do we need to think forward about an increase in certain areas, or are we in good shape?
Sure. So there were different bills that passed, and I haven't read each individual bill completely, but looking over the summary and the deadlines for each of the bills, I believe the only one that would directly affect us fiscally during FY22 would be the canine retirement costs. The other ones, I believe the bulk of them have a deadline date of July 1, 2022. So that would be a consideration moving into FY '23, I believe.
Good to know. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kavachi. Ms. Gilbert, did you have anything else you wanted to bring up tonight? I know you had gone through the line items there and
Yeah, I had a lot of free time yesterday. I
Yeah.
went through the line items of the budget yesterday.
are those questions you want to bring up now, or do you want to try and get with Ms. Colston maybe and
I
get some
think-
answers from
I
her?
think instead of adding more time to this meeting, I'm gonna try to catch up with Ms. Colston if she's available tomorrow
Right, okay,
and ask some individual questions that I had. Thank you.
okay, thank you. All right. Hearing no other items on the budget. We can conclude that item, I think. Ms. Matthews, Ms. Colston, thank you very much for all the good work. I think that, the fact that we have so little to discuss here is a testament to the good work done, by the city staff on pulling all that together. So that's good. So I believe that concludes our agenda, and with that, it will conclude the meeting. And so without objection, we are adjourned. And I'll just remind everybody that our next meeting will be next Monday night at 7 o'clock here in City Hall in person again. And we will at that time come to some final decisions on these items and be ready to move forward. And that's it. Thank you all very much. The meeting is adjourned.